Well, good evening, friends. Welcome to those in person at the Temple of Light, and we welcome all of those joining online as well. We're thrilled to share this special evening of launching this special book, The Hidden Story of the Mahabharata. And before the battle begins, the Pandava brothers, they invoke their conchas and their instruments, and as will we with the chanting group are going to lead us into divine chants of Krishna.
Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Brahma Vishnu Sada Shiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Sat Guru Om Kara. Jai Guru Om Kara, Jaya Jaya Satguru Omkara. This next chant was written by Swami Kriyananda. It's Hare Krishna, and that's pretty much all the words, except we're going to do Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, and Hare Guru. Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, 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 Hare Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare Guru, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare Guru, 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 Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare Guru, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Guru, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Guru, Hare Hare.
About 20 years ago, one of my first trips to Ananda village was here for yoga teacher training with Nayaswami Indradevi and Nayaswami Gyandev. And as part of that, Gyandev told the story of the Mahabharata. I had never heard it before. And I was absolutely mesmerized, not by him, although he is mesmerizing, but it's like Swami Kriyananda said, if you meet one or two people, you could say they're special, but what they're doing makes them special. It was the message that he was sharing, the magnetism, the divine love, the grace of the Mahabharata. And when Gyandev approached Dharmadevi and I a couple years ago with this idea of a book on the Mahabharata, we had a one-word response, which was an emphatic yes. And it is a real joy and privilege and honor to introduce Gyandev and this book. For Dharmadevi and I, we feel it's one of the most special that Crystal Clarity and Ananda Sangha have been able to share within recent memory. Of course, every book, like when Swami would publish, we would always say, this is going to be the bestseller, but we really feel that about this one. Did you know that today is one of the most important days of Diwali? So we are in the auspicious holiday, which is, of course, about the other Indian epic, the Ramayana. And how apropos that we are celebrating the longest epic in recorded history, I believe, the Mahabharata this evening. And not only is it Diwali, this special day today, but it's also All Saints' Day. So very much we have the original yoga of the East coming with the original yoga of the West. And Gyandev has really brought that beautiful blend in this book. It's the mesmerizing story with the interspersed meetings, and we know that you will absolutely love it. He's dedicated his life to sharing the teachings of self-realization. I think most of us know, but some that are joining new online, that Gyandev also has led the Ananda School of Yoga and Meditation. He is the co-founder of the Yoga Alliance. But in his heart of hearts, he is like Arjuna, and he's bowing down before Krishna and saying, my Lord, I choose you. And we choose him to come up now.
I really don't know how I got involved with the Mahabharata. And when I first came on the spiritual path, I was managed to find a contraband copy of Master's original magazine articles on his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. And he referred to the Mahabharata and that, but the Mahabharata wasn't so central, it was the Gita itself. I didn't think much of it until 1988, I went on pilgrimage to India, and the pilgrimage had absolutely nothing to do with the Mahabharata. Didn't go to any sites that had any relevance to the Mahabharata. But when I came back, I just dove in, and I've never stopped. And I don't know what actually made that happen, but I'm very, very happy that it did happen. So I started to tell some stories from the Mahabharata and occasional evening programs at the Expanding Light. It wasn't much. And then 1994, we were debating. I was manager of the Expanding Light, and I was meeting with Nayaswami Devi, and we were figuring out what are we going to do for what was then Winter Renewal Week. It's now called Inner Renewal Retreat. And she said, oh gosh, in the early days of Ananda, we had somebody who would tell the story of the Mahabharata. We don't have anybody like that anymore. Do you know of anybody like that? and I just said, I'll do it. I'll do it. So I did it, but I did it much more than I thought I would do, because it ended up being a 3-night play with a cast of 18 people. And I had never written a play, had no interest in writing a play, but that's just what transpired. And after that, I began to tell the story more and more, as Narayan was saying, for yoga teacher training was the primary place that I would tell it. But a lot of other places, I know some time down in Santa Cruz you did it, and did it in Italy. That was hard because I had to stop after every sentence for it to be translated. The story wants to go, and when you have to wait, it's a tricky one. So, but I got one continual request, and that was, would you please make a longer recording? And most people said, would you please make a video recording? And I was like, no, because I know how much trouble it is to make a video that's going to be 12, 14 hours long, something like that. It would be nuts. But it was all, they wanted audio, and I thought, well, that makes sense. Put it, so they can play it in a car as they're commuting to work and all that. I'll make an audio, not a book, an audio. And I just kept this idea floating around, and people requested it more and more, but it never, and I made a stab at it in 2006, but things got really busy in other ways, and I had to table it. And then I tried again in 2017, and that didn't work either. But then last year, I really got the feeling that at last, I think this time has come for me to do this. And I started to put together my thoughts, and I started to realize what I'd done to the story by fitting it into 2 evenings. I had really, really compressed it, and it needed to be expanded to tell the real story. So I was working on the audiobook, but of course, an audiobook has a script, and a script is like a book. And Crystal Clarity wanted a book. So here it is. And next year, if God and Guru are willing, we'll have the audiobook. Which has been my real dream all along. But I'm so happy to have this book because I know that everybody will relate to it in their own way, whether it's through the book, through audio, whatever, just different ways for this marvelous, marvelous story, marvelous teaching to make its way to more and more people. And in the early 90s, I started to realize I had been reading an abridged version of the Mahabharata, telling stories from that abridged version. But I realized I needed to see the whole thing because I don't know how legitimate this abridged version is. I need to see the real thing. So I looked for, is there a literal, unabridged translation of the Mahabharata? And yes, there is one. It was done in the late 1800s by K.M. Ganguly. And you may be wondering, why is there only one? There's many of everything else you could name, many abridged versions for sure, but why only one? But when you see that what he did occupies about 5,000 pages of small type, you can see why not very many people are chomping at the bit, I think, to translate from the original Sanskrit into English. But I was very, very happy to have my 12-volume copy of Ganguly's Mahabharata, and he's very scholarly also to really make sure he got the right translation. I realized this is what I want to use. I want to use the real thing. I want to use the real scripture by Vedavyasa. I don't want to use what other storytellers have done, which is perfectly within their rights. Storytellers can do whatever they want with a story. But I didn't want to do that, and I haven't done that. I want to be, well, I don't want to say exactly like Vedavyasa's version, because it has to be a lot shorter, whole lot shorter. So I got to studying that and putting it more into realistic terms of how long it would take to tell this story. And I realized as I was getting deeper into the literal translation that why would I do anything else but do it just as Vedavyasa did, only a lot shorter? Because in the literal translation, you'll see someone who could have said something in 2 sentences, say it in at least 2 pages, sometimes 20 pages, and sometimes more than that. And not everybody has the endurance for that sort of thing. Their interest begins to wane. So I was sort of boiling down the Mahabharata, because the actual scripture is quite an interesting ride, because you'll be going along in the story, and then there will be a digression. One of the speakers will something will remind him of the story of, and so I go off and tell that story. And then someone in that story is reminded of the story of, and it goes another digression. It can go 3 or 4 times out, and then gradually make its way most of the way back, but then go in another direction with digressions, and it finally comes back to the original, and you wonder, what was happening before? I don't remember where we were in the story. So there's a lot that can be done with abridging a story like that, and a lot that needs to be done in order to make it palatable for people, to make it readable. So I really had 2 goals in doing this book. One of them, of course, it says right in the subtitle, with inner meanings from Paramhansa Yogananda. I didn't want to do just another abridged version of the Mahabharata because Master had so much to say about, yes, the Gita, but when I actually got into making the story, I realized there are so many parts of the story that Master didn't even mention in his writings, yet that fit right into his teachings. And not only that, but there are some parts of the story that make no sense whatsoever unless you know something like Master's teachings. You can say, I get it. I get what's happening here. Because, Master and Swami would talk about how the Mahabharata is really our story, the story of our spiritual path. And that we need to look at it in that way. I have had so many Indians come to me after they've been at one of the storytelling evenings, and it's like, well, if you ever want to feel imposter syndrome, just be a white American standing up in front of Indians telling the story of the Mahabharata. But almost without exception, they've come up and said, everybody in India knows the Mahabharata, and nobody knows what it means. Which was a revelation to me, but it's true. They know it as a teaching of moral behavior and of politics and of good versus evil and stuff like that. But what Master did is he took it down to being very, very personal. And as I said, most of what he wrote about was of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the teeny tiniest piece of the Mahabharata. But so many of his teachings apply to other parts of the Mahabharata. And I thought, this is what I want to do, because I don't want to just bring his teachings on the Gita. He's already done that. Swami's already done that. But I wanted to bring those teachings out, show how they apply to much of the rest of the Mahabharata, and it was a lot of fun. And as I said, there are some episodes where I just couldn't figure out what was going on, why this happened, until I thought, Master has a teaching about this. And so it's been a wonderful journey putting it together, and really feels like a privilege for me to be able to blend Master's teachings with the larger story of the Mahabharata in this way. So that was one of my goals. My other goal was, it came on, all the years I've been telling the stories, and people would come to me afterwards. These are the people who are always requesting the audio recording, which I never allowed them to be recorded, by the way, because I was afraid that if it got recorded once, even the small version, I would never do it. And I needed to do it. So people would come afterwards. They'd be so excited about the Mahabharata, and they'd say, okay, tell me an abridged version I can read, and I'd suggest one. And they'd go and read it, and almost without exception, at least the ones who stayed in touch in any way, they would bail out in record time. All the Sanskrit names, all the complexity of the story, and the digressions upon digressions upon digressions. They just couldn't handle it. And they'd put it down, and as far as I knew, they just never went back to it. And I didn't want to do something like that. I wanted to do one that people are going to read and read the whole thing and really feel it's part of their life, because it is. It's part of all our lives. So I wanted it to be the full story of the Mahabharata, nothing significant left out, and yet focused enough that people would stay with it. And I got just a little over a week ago a friend who actually had received a review copy of this, wrote me and said, "Gyandev, you hit the Goldilocks zone. Not too long, but has everything you want. that people will take it to the end. Toward the end of the writing process, I had Nayaswami Om Prakash look at it. And he's a fellow aficionado of the Mahabharata. And the first time we called, he found little pieces that needed something more explicit, because some people, by the time they got to that part of the Mahabharata, would have forgotten something from earlier in the Mahabharata that was very important for making sense of the current episode. So he helped me tie a couple things, not rely on people remembering that too much. But his first reaction was, Gyandev, your writing is just bang, bang. No digressions, none of the endless talking that goes on in the Mahabharata. And I said, yep. And that's intentional. I said, I don't want anybody bailing out of this. I want them to be having fun, and yet at the same time having inspiration as well. So this has been a real journey for me, and as I continue this journey, the audiobook will be another piece of that journey, and I hope that it will be an enjoyable journey for many of you here and many other people who are watching, because it's, as I say, it's the story of our lives. And to be able to bring to life things that we feel inside, things that we maybe haven't quite understood for ourselves. Master said that every main character in the Mahabharata represents a specific spiritual or psychological quality within us. And we need to read the Mahabharata or listen to the Mahabharata with that in mind. And that's not easy, because the story itself, just as a story, is so enthralling. You just get wound up in it. But periodically, if you can just pull back a little bit and see, how do I fit into this? Because the characters representing these qualities, our qualities, some of them better than others, and these qualities nudge us in the direction of the choices that we make. And it's the choices that we make that really define what our life experience is. Our qualities don't force us to make certain choices, although some of the qualities are so predominant that they virtually do, but they do nudge us in certain directions. And to really understand what's going on with our own psyche that is giving us the experience of life that we're having, that's really valuable. Because it's when we realize that then comes the option, then comes the real choice, the choice to stay with it or not. And some of those qualities are very, very deeply ingrained, for sure. But when we recognize that we have them, that's when the choice can come. That's when our life direction can make a small change or a big change or a change that we're not even aware of. Just being aware of the possibility of something being different in us can have implications for what comes down the line. And this is what pilgrimage is about. And I think this book is essentially a pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage to India, yes. Back in history, yes. Although the Mahabharata isn't actually history, as you'll see if you read it. Couldn't possibly be history, but based on a skeleton of history. But it's our lives, and I'm so grateful to the people who helped make it happen. To Nayaswami Narayan and Nayaswami Dharma Devi for their unceasing patience and support of somebody who had a little trouble producing it when he thought he was going to be able to produce it. Also to Nayaswami Rambhakta for his many, many excellent editing suggestions. And to Nayaswami Lakshman for his impeccable proofreading. I understood a lot more about what it is to be a proofreader reading his comments than I thought I knew. I didn't. And by the way, if you find any errors in the book like that, don't blame Nayaswami Lakshman, because I couldn't resist making a few changes after he had done the proofreading, so who knows what found its way in. And as I mentioned, also Nayaswami Om Prakash, who really helped me to support people who the Mahabharata is newer, and they might not remember some of the events that happened earlier in the story when those events become suddenly more significant later in the story, and for encouraging me to tie them together a bit more explicitly. But since the Mahabharata is a story, I suppose you'd like to hear a story. Okay. I'm going to share one. I'm actually going to, when I get to it, I'm going to read it from the book. It's a very short one. And it's one that I suspect those of you who know the Mahabharata don't know this story. So it'll be a nice little adventure for you. This happens after Yudhishthira, who is the eldest of the 5 Pandava brothers, gambled away their kingdom. Okay, in a crooked dice game, he lost their kingdom. He had this little issue with gambling. And that meant that he and his 4 brothers and their common wife, which is a whole nother story, Draupadi, had to not only leave their kingdom, but go into exile in the forest. And they had to exchange their royal garments for deerskins, and they had to live in strict poverty for 12 years in the forest. Now, you'd think that their guru, who by this time in the story was Krishna, their cousin, was also their cousin, would have come to help them. In fact, he would have prevented the dice game in the first place. However, Krishna was born to cause the war. It was his mission to cleanse the earth of the evil that had overtaken it. Allegorically, the evil Asuras, the demons, had been finally defeated by the gods, the Devas, and had been kicked out of heaven and had to live in exile in the nether regions, which they didn't like very much. So they decided, if we can't rule in heaven, we're going to rule on earth. And they incarnated among the royal families of the earth and began to move in, take over. And this caused no end of distress for the people. Now, this is all symbolic. For those of you who know the yugas, this is symbolic of the yuga cycle. That the whole Mahabharata starts in a time of great, great peace and tranquility on earth and in heaven, because the Devas had kicked out the Asuras. But the Asuras decided, again, if we're not going to be in heaven, we're going to rule on earth. So they incarnated on earth, began to take over, and their evil began to spread among humanity. It's the yugas. It's just an allegorical expression of the cycles of the yugas. So the earth, in her despair over the evil that had taken over the earth, went to Brahma, the creator, and prayed and asked for deliverance from this. And Brahma sent the Devas, said, go to earth, incarnate among human beings, and do battle with the Asuras. And before incarnating, the Devas went to Lord Vishnu, Narayana, and asked him, will you not incarnate also to help us in this task? And Narayana said, so be it. And he took the form of a humble cowherd named Krishna. So back to later in the story where the game has been lost, the game of dice has been lost, the Pandavas are in exile in the forest. Draupadi is not happy. I mean, she was a queen. She didn't go for deerskins. It just wasn't her style. After a time, Krishna and a large contingent of his kinfolk came to visit the Pandavas. He'd only recently learned of the dice game, for he had been fully occupied defending Dwarka, his kingdom, from attack. He was outraged about the dice game and said fiercely, the earth shall drink the blood of Duryodhana and Karna, of Dushasana and Shakuni, the main bad guys, and we will install Yudhishthira on the throne. The wicked deserve to die. He began to talk about the coming war, his eyes ablaze with a fiery light. He became so passionate that he seemed bent on incinerating the entire universe. Arjuna hastened to soothe him by telling stories of Krishna's miraculous achievements in former lives. After a time, Krishna became his usual calm self once again, and he said with great affection, you are mine, Arjuna, and I am yours. We are the ancient rishis, Nara and Narayana, born now for a special purpose. You are from me, and I am from you. No one can tell the difference between us. Hearing those sweet words, everyone sat in a powerful silence for a time. Draupadi broke the silence by launching into a passionate account of all her miseries. She began to weep over the Pandavas' failure to protect her from humiliation in the dice game when her clothing was almost taken off her. She said, fie on Arjuna's prowess! Fie on Bhima's strength! Why do those great heroes even now not kill the Kauravas? Why do they not care what has happened to me? Truly, I have no husbands. Krishna replied, weep not, lady. The heavens might fall, the earth might split in two, the oceans might dry up, but I promise that you shall once more be the Queen of Kings. There's so much in that short selection. The deep affection between Arjuna and Krishna that goes back so many incarnations. The outrage of God over evil overtaking us. Not outrage at us, but outrage that it would happen, which is a little ironic since God designed this whole play in the first place. But this is one of those things we need to put on the table. The Draupadi was born full-grown from a sacrificial fire. No surprise that she would be a bit of a fiery person. And then closing that little episode, Arjuna saying, or Krishna saying, don't worry, I've got this. And this is what God is saying to us. Don't worry, I've got this. The question is, are you going to cooperate with it? Or will I have to drag you kicking and screaming back to heaven? And of course, none of us want to be dragged anywhere, kicking and screaming. Swami used to enjoy telling a story about Nara, a prior incarnation of Arjuna, the great master, Nara. He said that once Satan, Maya, appeared to Nara and manifested this supernally beautiful woman right in front of Nara. And Nara smiled at her calmly and then manifested 100 other beautiful women, everyone just as beautiful as the first. And as Swami put it, what could Maya do? He had to give up. So I thought it would be fun to go back in time a little bit before that episode. And, you know, it's interesting that because it's a little dark in here, I can't really see what time it is. You thought Halloween was scary? That's nothing compared to a speaker who can't see the clock. Okay. It's early. Okay. I'll do one story. One story. Might last a little bit longer, but not super long. Because how in the world did the 5 Pandavas marry one girl? How did that come forth? The Pandavas had escaped one of the many nefarious plots of the Kauravas and had lived in isolation, disguised as Brahmin ascetics for a year out in the forest, away from all civilization. Until they found out that there was going to be a wedding ceremony of the Princess Draupadi, daughter of King Drupada, in the kingdom of Panchala. And they heard all about her. They heard how she had been born full grown from a ceremonial fire, and how when she'd been born, there'd come a voice from the heavens that said, "This maiden shall be the foremost of all women. Through her will be accomplished the destruction of countless kshatriyas, countless the caste of rulers and warriors, and she will accomplish the purpose of the gods." Well, hearing that she was the most beautiful maiden in the world, and she had been born in this way, all 5 Pandavas fell in love with her, and they and their mother, Kunti, decided that they were going to go to Panchala for this wedding, because her husband was going to be decided by the winner of a very, very difficult contest of archery. So they went to Panchala on foot, long ways. They went on foot, and they found lodgings on the outskirts of this capital city in the home of a potter. And they watched the kings and princes from all around come to compete in this contest for Draupadi's hand. All the Kauravas came, absolutely. Duryodhana, the eldest Kaurava, the lead bad guy in the whole story, although his buddy Karna is kind of a close second. Ordinarily, Karna would not have been able to come to something like this because he was of a low caste, or at least everybody thought he was of a low caste. But Duryodhana had made his buddy Karna the king of a very small kingdom, given him his own kingdom. So he became eligible to come to this contest for a princess because only kings and princes were able to come. So all this royalty arrived in Panchala in anticipating this great contest. Somebody else came also, and that was Krishna. Krishna and his brother Balarama came from their kingdom far off on the west coast of India. It was a long, long ways away. They had come. They had not come to compete for Draupadi's hand, however. They had come to meet their cousins, the Pandavas, for their mother, Kunti, was the sister of Krishna's father. You got that? Easy. Up, meet here. Got it. All right. Well, the day of the contest arrives, and kings and princes came to the amphitheater, grand amphitheater. All the people of the kingdom came to this grand amphitheater that was adorned with countless wreaths of fragrant flowers. The kings and princes sat around an elegant central stage. The Pandavas came, still in their disguise as Brahmin ascetics. They sat over in the Brahmin section. Finally, in walked Draupadi, dressed in elegant silks and adorned with every gem, jewel, gold, you name it. She was truly the most beautiful maiden in all the world. All the kings and princes were so transfixed by her that they didn't notice the five rather unusual-looking Brahmins over in the Brahmin section who resembled bull elephants more than they resembled ascetics. But Krishna noticed them. And he tapped his brother on the shoulder and he said, "Look over there. That one, see those 5 Brahmins? That one is Yudhishthira, the eldest. The huge one next to him is Bhima, then Arjuna, and then the twins." Balarama looked at them, smiled, and looked at Krishna, and they both sat back to watch the contest. Draupadi's brother, Prince Drishtadyumna, came up on the stage, and he said, "Welcome, O great kings and princes. Here is your task. Your target is atop this tall pole revolving at the top, behind this screen that you see. Your task is to string the ceremonial bow and shoot an arrow through the tiny hole in the screen into the target as it passes that hole. Whoever succeeds will have my sister, Princess Draupadi, as his wife." Well, as if that weren't hard enough, the rate of rotation of the target was not uniform. They didn't have nice electronics to make everything go in a smooth fashion. There was somebody who was cranking over there as a human being, and it was sometimes going faster, sometimes going slower. It was going to take real good luck or real good intuition to know when to shoot. And that wasn't the worst of it, because the ceremonial bow was difficult to string. And that was intentional because Draupadi's father, King Drupada, had ordered that it be so. Because he had long harbored this wish that his daughter would marry Arjuna. So he had ordered that the bow be made extraordinarily stiff, so only the greatest of archers could possibly string it, much less hit the target. So the contest began. One by one, the kings and princes came up on the stage, and their ancestry and achievements were all announced, and they picked up the bow and began to bend it to string it. It was so stiff that it sprang out of their hands. It threw some of them to the floor. They couldn't string that bow, even in their imagination. Finally, Karna came. Karna, the Sudaputra, the son of a Suda, very low caste, but now a king, so he could compete. Came up, he picked up the bow, easily bent it, wrapped the string around the end, placed the first arrow on the bow, drew the bow to full circle, aimed at the hole in the screen. The whole amphitheater just became totally silent. Seeing his evident skill, Draupadi became very alarmed at the possibility of him winning, and she stood up and she said, "I will not have a Sudaputra as my husband." Karna threw down the bow and stormed out off the stage. Every one of them, all the kings and princes, had failed in the contest. And then, over in the Brahmin section, Arjuna, the middle Pandava, the great warrior, stood up, stepped out of the Brahmin section, began to walk up onto the stage. There was buzzing throughout the crowd. A Brahmin? How's a Brahmin going to win this when all the famous Kshatriya kings and princes had failed? There were arguments among the ascetics, among the Brahmin ascetics. Some of them said, no, he should not compete. He will surely fail and make a laughingstock of all Brahmins. And others said, no, look at him. No, he moves with such grace and such strength. He could well win the princess. Let him compete. So Arjuna walked up onto the stage, picked up the bow, easily bent it, placed the first arrow on the bowstring, drew the bow to full circle once again. Silence throughout the amphitheater. And he held that bow in full circle as he aimed at that small hole, trying to anticipate the time when the target would pass that hole. And waited, and waited, and waited. And then suddenly he released that arrow, flew right through the hole into the target, took the target down onto the floor. Everybody stood and cheered, especially the ascetic Brahmins over there, waving their upper garments. One of their own had won the princess. Arjuna put down the bow, and he walked over to Princess Draupadi to receive the ceremonial garland as the winner. Draupadi held the garland, looked over at her father, who nodded as if to say, so be it. She placed the garland around Arjuna's neck. All the other kings and princes were outraged. One of them cried out, this is not right. A Kshatriya princess should marry a Kshatriya. Another one called out, Drupada, you have humiliated all of us. And a third said, and you will die for that. And they got up and drew their weapons and began to advance on Drupada. Arjuna picked up the ceremonial bow once again. And Bhima, his huge, older brother over in the Brahmin section, stood up, jumped out of the Brahmin section, uprooted a tree, and carried that tree with him up onto the stage like a gigantic mace. And together they discouraged the kings and princes from attacking Drupada. Well, when things had settled down a little bit, the Pandavas took Draupadi away from the arena, back toward where they were staying in the outskirts of the city. And as they reached the house, Arjuna called out to Kunti, said, Mother, come see the alms we've obtained today. For you see, they had supported themselves as Brahmin ascetics would by begging for alms every day. And Kunti, without even turning around to look, said, all of you share what you've obtained, just like she always said when her sons came home with alms. And the brothers looked at each other and they said, share Draupadi? How is it possible? This is a calamity. And there was a great uproar in the family. And everybody looked to the wise oldest brother, Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira said, the mother's word is sacred. We have never disobeyed her in our lives, nor shall we now. All 5 of us shall marry Draupadi. Well, that evening, they escorted Draupadi back to the palace for the wedding festivities. And Yudhishthira announced to King Drupada who these 5 Brahmin ascetics really were. And Drupada was overjoyed. His dream of his daughter marrying Arjuna was going to come true. And then Yudhishthira said all 5 of them were going to marry Draupadi. And the king's dream became a nightmare. How could he consent to such immorality? There was a huge uproar in the court. which was finally settled by the sage Vyasa, who is not only the author of the Mahabharata, but an important character in the Mahabharata. He took King Drupada aside and he said, "O king, do not worry. There is scriptural sanction for one woman marrying more than one man. And in your daughter's case, there is something even more. For you see, Vyasa was an avatar. He could see the past and the future, not just the present. He said, in her last incarnation, Draupadi was the daughter of a forest rishi, a forest sage. And although she was beautiful and chaste, she had no husband. So she prayed ardently for year after year that she would have a husband. And after a long time, Lord Shiva came to her and he said, my child, you shall have 5 husbands. And Draupadi had said, but my Lord, I only asked for 1. And Shiva said, yes, but you prayed for a husband 5 times. But this shall be in your next incarnation. Well, hearing this, what could Drupada say but give his consent for the marriage to take place? And it did take place. It was a grand celebration, not only of the marriage of the Pandavas to Draupadi, but really the resurrection of the Pandavas, whom everyone had thought had been killed in the house of lac, fire, which is a whole other story. Many exquisite gifts were given to the new, I would say couple, but it's not exactly a couple, to the new sixum. And it was a marvelous, marvelous time. It was exceedingly wonderful. But it was not exceedingly wonderful for Duryodhana, the eldest of the Kauravas. Yet another of his plots to kill the Pandavas had failed. Worse than failed. For not only were the Pandavas still alive, but they had married Draupadi, whom he had wanted to marry. And now they had powerful allies in King Drupada, their new father-in-law, and their cousin Krishna. And to top it off, he had been humiliated by his failure even to string the bow in the contest for Draupadi. So in great despair, he and Karna and his brother Dushasana and Shakuni, the evil gambler who had orchestrated the crooked dice game, began to go back to their home city. Something would need to be done about this. So I'll turn it back over to Narayana now.
Thank you, Gyandev. And those are just 2 little vignettes from the book. We want to now take the time to send out a wave of blessing. You'll recall that the Mahabharata was written in descending Dwapar Yuga, right before entering Kali Yuga, and here we are in the ascending energy age coming out. When we need you, Lord, our beloved, you descend. So the world at this time needs love, it needs light, it needs divine blessing. So we invite you through the book, which you can see on the altar, to send your conscious energy and goodwill and blessings, that this book be a great light, that it go and it touch many receptive souls and help them on the path to self-realization with the knowing of their own innate divinity and the grace of God through this great epic, our own journey back home. So let's rub our palms together and send 3 ohms to this book, that it spread the light, the Mahabharata, the giver of light, throughout the entire world. Oh. So for those that are present, we invite you to come and you can greet Gyandev. If you have your book, he'll be happy to sign it. If you don't have a book and you want one, we have them there. You can pick them up. And if we run out, we might need to ask Jennifer Volbrick's help, because we already sold out in LA and we're sending books to LA. So we have a little bit of a dance going on here. Thank you, Gyandev, for a beautiful evening. And thank you. And thank you to Krishna and to our great masters.